Hey guys, this is Adwikta. Welcome to the Whispers of the Old God card review. This is the first segment, the first batch of cards, and it's about 2.5 weeks since Blizzard announced the expansion, and we've been waiting a while to do our card review because we just wanted enough cards to come out that I could really get a good feel of where the meta is heading in Whispers of the Old God. And I think we're finally at that point. So just like the Grand Tournament card review, this card review series is going to be focused on how the meta is going to change. It won't just be something about like this card is good, this card is bad, although we'll do all that. It'll be focused on larger themes of what I think is going to happen in the arena. And it'll be focused on the arena. If you're here because you somehow were expecting a review for a constructed, you don't want to hear my opinions on it. It'll be more hilariously out of touch. Then it'll be actually be useful. And two, there's no legendary cards. We're not reviewing any legendary cards because they don't really impact the arena meta, except when you get Reno'd. And then it really influences that one particular game and you get really salty. But that aside, legendaries don't have a lot of effect and they are really complicated. So they usually like take up a lot of time to like discuss and whatever to really analyze, and it's just not worth our time. So we're going to focus really hard on the commons and really hard on the class cards, and then also do rares and epics. And before we really dig into it, into the, I don't even know what to call it, WOG meta? The Old Gods meta. Before we really dig into the Old Gods meta, and what I think is going to happen, I want to discuss just very briefly how we got here, right? I want to see the impact of the GVG and TGT metas, because the Old Gods is a large expansion. It will change everything. 30% of the cards you will be offered is going to switch, because you have to add the offering rate changes to it. We're losing the LOE offering rate bonus of 50%, and we're gaining, presumably, 25% Old Gods offering rate, maybe even higher. So in GVG, just to start us off, the two themes of the expansion were fast tempo mechs and RNG. So your top arena cards, your top common cards were Piloted Shredder, right? RNG and a great tempo card, a great curve card on 4. And then like Mech Warper, Spider Tank, Mech Yeti. Those were your top cards. Top common cards, neutral-wise, for the entirety of GVG, and they really set the tone. Everybody was on the board. It was really easy to curve out and to draft a curve. You barely had to worry about it. It just kind of happened. And then if you can tempo out faster than your opponents, you typically won because you had the board control and the removals had gone down. So it was a very distinctive shift in the meta from Classic, which was all about value and board trading and all that. So GVG totally shifted the meta in that way, and you could tell why. It's because of the cards that we're mentioning before, right? Mech Warper, Spider Tank, Mech Yeti, Piloted Shredder. If these are the best cards that are common and neutral, then every class has them, every class picks them, and you just end up with a meta that reflects that. Now, the same thing, but in the opposite direction, like almost like a correction, happened in TGT. Where what was TGT neutral commons like? Well, the big one is North Sea Kraken, right? And at the time, yeah, you can go check the videos. I was probably the hardest pusher for just how good North Sea Kraken is and just what effect it'll have on the meta. Ranked it the best card, the best neutral common in the game, still ranked the best neutral common in the game for like almost all classes, like Warlock and Hunter aside or something, because it's a little too slow and too high mana cost. But for almost all the classes, including all the popular ones, this is now the best common card. And that has a big effect on the game, right? Whereas Shredder was the best common card, it meant curve, centered, RNG. Now the best common card is a slow, plotting, but super powerful and with initiative card on turn 9. So that's going to slow the game down. And on top of that, your Inspire mechanics are all snowball mechanics. So it became really important to like try to find a way to get on the board, and then much less go for face and much more just try to keep the board. Because as long as you can keep the board, you get to drop that Kavaldir, you get to drop that Muklas, and then you get to hero power your way to victory. And a side effect of that is that there became this extreme exaggeration of the haves and the have-nots in this like class warfare in TGT, where the classes with the bad hero powers, like Warrior, like Hunter, like Priest, they got kind of shafted. And the classes with the good hero powers were already doing pretty well. Like Mage and Paladin and Rogue got insanely good. These are all because of the common neutral cards. All the common neutral cards come together in each expansion, and they really set the tone for the expansion. So if you want to know where the meta is going in a big picture-wise in the arena, you want to look at common neutrals. And so now we take a look at how the Whispers of the Old God meta is going to shape up in the arena. So for the Old Gods, we're once again looking at the neutral commons, and you may think that the neutral commons are, how many of them have actually been revealed, but as it turns out, it's actually quite a few neutral commons. We have 8 of 22 neutral commons already revealed. Okay, so I don't know if there's going to be 22 neutral commons in Old Gods, but there were 22 in TGT, so that's like a reasonable estimate. So we're at like more than 1/3 of the meta kind of determined when it comes to common neutrals. And some of these are Cthulhu cards and they won't be in the arena, but there may be more neutral common Cthulhu cards, right? Like, who knows? So in my head, about 1/3 of the meta is determined. And so we can have some kind of an idea of where it's going. And we could be wrong, but what is a video previewing the new meta about, if not a little bit of speculation? So the two themes that I want to draw your attention to that I think the Wrath of the Old Gods meta is headed towards, and we'll update this again before the release, after they release all the cards in a much more in-depth series. But one is that it's slow. It seems like all the cards released are going to be a bit slower, and two, that to the extent that it's not just like these reactive, like slow-based cards, and they're actually cards that like do stuff with the board, they're cards that are better if you trade rather than go face. They're all about protecting the board. This is kind of echoing a little bit of the TGT meta. It's not that we have one big card making things slow, or, even if you look at Cavaldi or Mukluk, they're essentially like 7 mana cards before you get to play it. It's not slow because of that, because you added like really powerful late game cards. It's slow because they're early game cards that just kind of drag the game on based on how you can get value from them, or based on how just their actual effects. So that brings us to the first card, which is Polluted Hoarder. Polluted Hoarder is a 4-mana 4/2 Death Rattle draw card. It's like a reverse of a Gnomish Inventor, which is a 2/4 you Battlecry draw card. And it's generally speaking better than a Gnomish Inventor because you'd rather have a 4/2 than a 2/4 past turn 3. You just want that damage more than you care about the 2 health, because chances of them still having something on the board that only deals very little health is kind of low. You just want to get the 4 damage in. Like, if you think about it this way, your 2/4 has to hit something twice to deal that 4 damage. This 4/2 only has to hit something once. So if it's not getting removed by something really tiny, which probably isn't on the board at that point, it's doing fine. On the downside, just like a Gnomish Inventor, it's still not a drop. It's a 4/2 for 4 mana. You're going to fall behind on the board, right? It's like playing a Cult Master on an empty board. That's not good for tempo. You kind of hesitate to even play a Cult Master on turn 4 and like trade stuff in, right? Like, that's even a little so to have one that doesn't even draw you a whole bunch of cards or set you up for anything, it's not a good thing. But still, it's a powerful card, right? You get a card. Its benefit is not tempo, it's card advantage. You're going to get the card advantage back later. Or you can drop it late in the game with 4 mana and just kind of like build up more stuff, right? Like you put a 4/2 body on the board without using a card. So good card, definitely a good card, but a slow card. And not as slow as, let's say, North Sea Kraken, but still slowing down the game in a different way. And looking at the card that was actually just released today, I'm filming this on a Monday, the Cult Apothecary. And the Cult Apothecary is something that is like a heal bot, the antique heal bot, which is rotating out of the meta for Constructed, and you can see him kind of try to replace that role. So instead of a 5 mana 3/3 that heals you for 8, which is the antique heal bot, and by the way, in Arena, nothing's being rotated out. So that's the heal bot is still in the Arena. The Cult Apothecary is a 5 mana 4/4, which already is really good. Just because it's Arena, you always want to have stats. And the battle cry says, for each enemy minion, restore 2 health to your hero. So, assuming you're not hopelessly behind, in which case this card is not going to help you or catch you back up, you're going to get like 4 health from it. So, once again, slow card, healing card. It's another common neutral. And it compares favorably to Antique Healbot because of the body, right? You'd rather have +1/+1 in stats than 4 healing, like pretty much always. And you could just compare it to like Priestess of Elune, Priestess of Elune is a 5/4 for 1 more mana, and it heals about the same amount, because this is going to get 4 health. You're probably not going to play it unless you get 4 health, and you're probably not going to get that much more than 4 health. But still, for 1 less mana, you get a extra, you lose 1 extra attack. I'll take it. I realize we're comparing this card to cards that aren't that great to begin with. Like, Healbot is not the best unless you're a Warlock, and Priestess of Elune flat out sucks. So this card is favorable compared to those, but it doesn't mean it's a good card. It's kind of an okay-ish card, and that's fine. But hey, once again, slow card, right? Polluted Hoarder is a good slow card. This is an okay slow card. You're seeing the meta kind of form here. And the next card I'm going to talk about, once again, another slow card. Brood of N'Zoth. I'm going to call it N'Zoth. I don't know what the actual pronunciation is. It's a 3 mana 2/2 with the Death Rattle. Give +1/+1 to all of your minions, which sounds like, ooh, all of your minions. But you're not the one killing it. It's probably your opponent that's going to kill it. And you're probably not going to have that many minions on the board. It loses like +1/+1 tempo right off the bat. You don't get it until this turn afterwards, earliest, and you have to have other stuff on the board that lives in order for it to get that value. It's slow, and I'm saying it's slow even though you're thinking, wait, but you need a really big board for this to trigger, so this works well in a fast deck, which is true, but it's still a slow card because you can't play it on turn 3 unless you're really far ahead, which you won't be on turn 3. Right? It's not a drop on turn 3. If you play it on turn 3, your opponent removes it, removes your 2-drop with their 2-drop, drops a real 3-drop. And what are you going to do with this card the next turn? Throw it into their 3-drop so your other card, your 4-drop, gets like 1 extra health and 1 extra attack? That's like really not worth it. So this is a card you play way later in the game, after you've already established the board. So it's a late game card. And it's a bad late game card. I was talking on the about this with Merps. It's like dollar and mage level bad. I'm not exaggerating how bad this card is. This is like below everything, just because you can't even control the +1/+1. And we already have a card kind of like that, right? The Anubiseth, which is 5 mana, 4/4. So like the stats work out, but that gives +3/+3 to a minion. This only gives +1/+1. So it takes 3 minions for this to trigger on to have it equal an Anubiseth, which is not a good card to begin with. That's like an average card at best. So this is an incredibly bad card. So it's not really going to affect the meta. It's just not going to be in the meta. But you kind of get an idea of where Blizzard is taking this. And these are the common neutrals, right? These are the cards that you should get used to seeing in your drafts. If you're not excited by this, neither am I. Hopefully Blizzard will release cooler cards later. Because so far, I've talked about GVG and TGT, right, to kind of give some perspective. Pilot a Shredder in GVG, topped by Kraken and TGT. So what are we getting with Old Gods? We don't know. It's none of these cards. And there's one more. We're not quite done yet. Infested Tauren is our last... well, not the last. There's actually one more after this. Is one of the common neutral cards. One more that we get that is slow. It's a taunt card with a Death Rattle. You're thinking, hey, Death Rattle's sticky. Not really. It's a 4 mana 2/3 taunt with a Death Rattle 2/2 that doesn't have taunt. So it's like appropriately statted if you don't count the Death Rattle and just treat it as a minion on the board, and not at all well statted for 4 mana because it's a Death Rattle. Now, it's also not a drop. You're not going to play this on turn 4 and be happy, because pretty much every 3-drop can eat the 2/3 and then still stay alive to then trade with your 2/2, which basically means this trades down with pretty much every 3-drop. And it trades up with very few 4-drops. You need like a 4/4 or a 5/4 for it to actually trade evenly. So it kind of does nothing you would want it to do. That being said, it is a taunt, so it's not totally worthless in the late game. It almost has enough stats to make it worth it. Nothing can be pinged down, so it'll be better than a Dragonly mechanic because of that. And that's kind of where it is. So again, not a very interesting, well, okay, maybe an interesting card, but not a very good card. Not a card you'll see very often, and slow. Not curve, not tempo, slow. Um, and finally, we're going with the Tentacle of N'Zoth, which is the last revealed common neutral card. It's a 1 mana 1/1, and you're thinking, hey, 1 mana, fast. No, slow. Its death rattle is deal 1 damage to all minions. So it is a 1-drop if your opponent plays a card and you trade it in. But it's not a 1-drop anytime afterwards if you have the board. So if you're going fast, you can't really play this card that effectively. And the chances that your opponent will ping it for free and it will only damage your minions it's so huge, right? So you not only lost a card, but your minions have lost health, and then your opponent could go on its merry way and drop another minion. So it compares with a sheep, right? A sheep is 2 mana, also a 1/1, but deals 2 damage to all minions. But that's because sheep actually do something, right? 2 damage is enough to kill stuff on the board. 1 damage, kind of rough. And it's also just 1 mana, right? If you're playing it from a defensive position, even switch over, right? I'm talking about how cards are slow. Even if you're a slow deck, what else are you doing with your mana on that turn? If you play it with another minion, you're damaging your other minion. If you play it without the other minions, you're wasting a ton of mana in the late game. I don't know what you're doing. So it's highly situational and just pretty bad version of the sheep to begin with. So again, not going to see much play, and also slow. And this it continues. It continues. We're not done with the slow cards yet. Okay, this is a bit of a stretch. I'm trying to fit it into my theme of slow, but the first rare card rare neutral we're going to review, Eater of Secrets, is a 4 mana 2/4. The battle cry says destroy all enemy secrets, gain +1/+1 for each. You're not destroying any secrets, or you'll destroy a secret every 3rd game or something, right? So this is even in times where you're facing a paladin or a mage who will probably have a secret, you're still just holding this card, right? It's a very reactive card. So again, slow. And then finally, Faceless Shambler is a epic card, 4 mana, technically a 1/1, but the battle cry is copy a friendly minion's attack and health, and it has a taunt naturally. So this is good if you have even a 4-drop to copy. And if you have a larger drop to copy, it's even better. So again, slow. You need to wait until the late game after you've already dropped a big thing, and then it doesn't get hurt for a turn before you can play it. Or you drop it on the same turn, but then you need to be at least turn 8 to get value out of it, probably turn 9 or turn 10. So Faceless Shambler, another slow card. Epic, won't affect the meta much, but still, you just see all the slow cards piling up, right? And now I'm going to go and talk about the only 2 other cards that were released. And none of them are common neutrals, by the way. These 2 that were released were neutrals. They're not common neutrals. One's a rare neutral and one's an epic neutral. And they're slow in a different way, but I categorize them as trading because they reward you for being on the board and trading with your opponent's minions consistently. Not rewarding you for being off the board or just slowing down the game by your own volition. So the first one is Corrupted Healbot, which is a 5 mana 6/6, and you're thinking fast, but it has a death rattle, which is restore 8 health to the enemy hero. So how do you get value out of this card? You don't hit your opponent's face. You trade, right? Or more likely, you play this card and you force your opponent to trade into you because you're a bit slow on the board. Even if you're fast on the board, you are not allowed to take advantage of the fact that you're on the board because this minion has come out. And sure, you may get to keep the board, but they're not dealing any damage. You're just very not incentivized to deal damage because whenever this dies, and it's probably not going to die the next turn, it may die in 2 turns from that, your opponent's getting healed just right back up again. 8 health. That's a lot. So this incentivizes being on the board and trading or slow, right? You can also just play really defensively and be like, I was never on the board, I never dealt any damage to you, I'm in no position to deal any damage to you, so now it's just a 6/6 for 5 mana, which is wonderful. Either way, rewarding slow play, not fast play. Slight caveat for maybe being on the board, but even if you're on the board, gotta trade. That being said, it's a pretty good card, right? 5 mana 6/6. Your opponent's health is not going to matter half the time, more than half the time. Not as good as a pit fighter. You definitely want the consistency of a pit fighter over one extra attack. Like attack gets more useless as you get higher, right? Like difference between 2 attack and 3 attack, huge. 3 and 4, really big. 4 and 5, definitely useful. 5 and 6, 6 and 7, pretty useless, right? So that extra attack, not worth that much. What else? Oh, Validated Doomsayer is our last neutral card that we're reviewing because it's the last one that's been revealed, and it is an epic, so you're not going to see it much. It is a 5 mana 0/7 with an amazing ability, which is at the start of your turn, set this minion's attack to 7. So that after one turn, it becomes a 7/7, or a 7 whatever health is remaining after your opponent deals with it. So this, it's actively, you can look at it two ways, right? If you have the board, it's likely to become a 7/7, which is great. So it incentivizes you to have the board. But again, how do you have a board and protect the Validated Doomsayer? You do it by trading, which slows you down and you kind of build up to a bigger late game. So again, just this anti-aggro strategy cards. Because if you're aggressive, you want to get some face damage in, right? You want to like have your opponents be removing your cards, so you're not the one initiating trading. And these are all cards where you have to initiate trades if you're on the board. Or Validated Doomsayer is totally okay if you're playing it on curve and your opponent like kind of has something on the board but not anything big. Like let's say your opponent has a Yeti on the board. What's he gonna do? Hit your Validated Doomsayer? Next turn, it's a 7/3. That's still pretty good. Like, is it as good as a 5-drop normally is? No, but that's because you're not on the board, right? Like, it's still okay to not be on the board. So this is a card that's really good if you are on the board and you can trade, but also pretty good if you're off the board, as long as you're not too far off the board. And regardless, even if you're off the board or you're on the board, your opponent wants to hit into it, which is not your face. So just slowing everything down. Also has a little bit of a snowball effect, but generally it just incentivizes you to trade, and if you don't have the board, it still is a card, right? It hedges its downside, whereas most of these cards don't hedge the downside. Like think of Frostwolf Warlord. 5 mana, it can grow. It can grow just as big as this guy. It can grow bigger than this guy. It probably won't grow bigger than a 7/7. But the downside is if you just play it onto a normal board, it's a 4/4. This is going to be some defense or whatever he can't remove, but then also 7 attack, which will allow you to trade up potentially. So a good card, definitely a good card, above average, but again, kind of big, kind of clunky, kind of slow. And that's the Whispers of the Old God meta. It's what it's going to shape up to be. It's going to be a slow meta. Now, again, we have almost 2/3 of the cards not revealed yet. 2/3 of the common neutral cards not revealed yet. And so the meta will still change a lot. Like if they just release like 3 2-drops that all do stuff that are all really good, okay, it'll get a little more curve heavy. But so far from what we've seen, things are slowing down. Now, unlike TGT, we can't make extrapolations because, like, if you remember TGT, we knew the Inspire mechanic. So instantly, like, I knew exactly where the meta is headed, right? You're going to have a bunch of Inspire cards. They're all going to be slow. They all require you to, like, have the board so you can, like, protect it. And so the whole meta is going to go that way. There's no mechanic in Whispers of the Old Gods. Cthulhu is a mechanic, but that's not in the arena. N'Zoth has come out, and he has a mechanic, but it's just, like, getting Death Rattles back. So if we're thinking more Death Rattles are going to come, who knows, right? Like, a Death Rattle could be really sticky, right? Like, Harvest Golems, Spider, Content Creepers, or it can be just, like, a slow card, like we saw with the Polluted Hoarder. Or it can be something totally seemingly irrelevant, like a Corrupted Healbot, right? So there's no real way to predict what's going to happen to the meta just because Death Rattles are going to be a theme. And speaking of that, there's 2 more gods to be revealed, right? We only know 2 themes in a 4-theme expansion. So I'm hoping at least one of the themes is going to be a unique theme that we haven't seen before, like a joust mechanic or something. But we'll see, and that's going to affect the meta. And that's all we have for today. We've just gotten through all the neutral cards, and the Whispers of the Old God meta is kind of coming together, but we'll go deeper into the class cards and the one sort of new mechanic, no keyword, but we haven't had a card like this before. The Forbidden cards is where we'll pick up tomorrow when we continue this, and then we'll get into class balance and what we're looking for and what we've seen in Whispers of the Old God reveals. Until then, I want to give a shout out to our Patreons. Who have supported the Grinning Goat. Thank you guys so much. It means so much for us to have your support. And if you're thinking of contributing, link is in the description below. And also, if you want to hear what Merps has to say about this, Merps, the other half of the Grinning Goat, you should listen to The Lightforge if you haven't checked it out yet. The Lightforge podcast is our podcast that we run weekly, and it comes out every Monday. You can Google it, you can search it on iTunes, any other of your podcasting services. You can watch it right here on this YouTube channel. We have our videos up, which also shows our faces. And he and I just kind of talk about the cards that we're interested in as we go, and as they're revealed. So that's also a good source of information if you want more. And otherwise, just sit tight. We'll wrap up tomorrow with all the cards that have been revealed so far with the class cards. See you guys.